Hello, and welcome to Skylight Live, presented by Skylight Theatre Company. My name is Tyree Marshall, and I'm an artistic associate at Skylight Theatre. As we dive even deeper into our 2021 season at Skylight, we now present We're Not Free Until We're All Free, the second panel of our Freedom series at Skylight to commemorate Juneteenth. Tonight's conversation will focus on uplifting all marginalized voices within the theater community. What can we do in order to meet everyone's needs? How do we make theater accessible and equitable for all? What systems within our theater community have prevented many marginalized groups from creating the theater they seek to create? Tonight, we have some amazing theater practitioners, activists, and artists to speak on those needs, share their own experiences, and provide suggestions for growth within our community to move forward. I'm proud and honored to present our moderator for this evening, Artistic Associate of Skylight Theatre, Director and Ensemble Studio LA member, Shaina Rosenthal. Shaina will introduce our esteemed panelists, but before we get started, we at Skylight gratefully acknowledge that we operate on the traditional lands of the Tongva, Tataviam, and Chumash peoples, including the Gabrielino from Nongenue and the Venturaino, members of the Takic, Chumash, and language families, and other indigenous peoples who made their homes in and around the area we now call Los Angeles. If you would like to know what native land you reside on, please visit nativegov.org for more information. If you have any questions tonight during the conversation, make sure to enter them in the chat below, and we'll try to answer as many as we can. And now, I'm happy to present to you, We're Not Free Until We're All Free. Shaina, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Tyree. I am Shaina Rosenthal. My pronouns are she, her. I am a white woman with brown hair and blue eyes, and I am wearing a black t-shirt that says, are you afraid of diversity? In the font of the popular 90s TV show, Are You Afraid of the Dark? And I am so honored to be here tonight in conversation with these artists and activists that I have admired for such a long time to hear about their journeys over the past year. I am a director and also an artistic associate at the Skylight, and very happy to represent Skylight in this conversation. And so before we get into everything, I would love to allow our esteemed panelists to introduce themselves. So I would love to start with Diana Wyenn.
Hi there, thank you. It's a joy to be here with you all. My name is Diana Wyenn. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am streaming to you from the unceded and traditional lands of the Chumash, Kizh, and Gabrielino peoples. I am a fair-skinned woman with a short bob haircut that is now blonde, though my roots are starting to show. And I am wearing a green shirt. Behind me is a window with some trees and the exposed wall of my home. I artistically identify primarily as a director, but I also choreograph, dramaturg, sometimes still perform, and I have designed in the past. So Swiss Army knife over here. And in terms of which communities, I am a part of the disabled community. So I'm invisibly disabled. I live with type 1 diabetes. So thank you, Shaina.
Thank you so much. And now I will throw it to our panelist, Amir Levi.
Hi, my name is Amir Levi. My pronouns are he, she, and they. I am on Tongva and Chumash land. A visual description of what I look like is I am very fair-skinned with dark brown hair. I am wearing a black and white floral blouse showing my showing a little chest, in which I am wearing a necklace with a little black square at the end and some green earrings that maybe you can see, maybe you can't, in this blurred Zoom background that I have. How I identify artistically is primarily as a performer, an actor, puppeteer, singer, clown, also a political activist, so creating art through political means. And in terms of the communities in which I identify, I am non-binary, Mexican, Israeli, Jewish, and gay.
Thank you so much. Our next panelist is Olivia Buntaine.
Hi, so happy to be here. My name is Olivia. I use she, her pronouns, and I am coming to you today from, Denver, Colorado. This isn't where I live, which I believe is the unceded lands of the Cheyenne people and the Ute people. I am a white woman with platinum-ish blonde hair. That's a sort of big old flop on my head and the sides are shaved, and I'm wearing gold hoop earrings and a sort of like punky button down with some like, I don't even know what's on there, like a donut. Yeah. And I am the artistic director of the Los Angeles-based company Project Nongenue, which centralizes the voices of women and marginalized populations in classical theater and mythology. I identify as a director, an intimacy director, and a playwright. In terms of the identities I bring into this conversation, I am a queer bisexual woman. I also am a survivor. And I think that's everything.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We will now hear from our panelist, Sandra May Frank.
Hi, hello. Hi, this is Sandra May Frank. And my sign name is like this. In deaf culture, we do have name signs. So this is my sign name. And my pronouns are she and her. And right now I am on the land acknowledged in Austin, Texas, but it's not. The land acknowledgement is of the Jamanos and of the Tonawaka. And what I look like, I'm a white female with brown hair, kind of short above the shoulders. And I have a silver chain necklace and a maroon tank top with a collar. And I am wearing earrings with crystals on them. And my background is a baby blue. And what I identify as in an artistic perspective, as an actress, director, ASL consultant, deaf consultant, deaf theater coach, and producer. I'm involved in Deaf West Theater, I've been for many years, and now I'm a production manager of Deaf Austin Theater here in Austin, Texas. And I identify as queer and deaf and female.
Fantastic, thank you so much. And our final panelist for this evening is Tiana Randall-Quant.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I'm Tiana Randall-Quant. I am my pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a light-skinned Black woman. I have a medium-sized afro. I wear glasses. I'm wearing gold hoops and a pink shirt, and my background is a white wall with half a calendar visible here. In terms of artistic background, I am primarily an actor and writer. I'm sometimes a producer. I am the Instagram manager and co-producer for the Wallace Studio Ensemble. You can also find me on YouTube with the 354 Squad. I am Black, I am queer, I identify as neurodivergent, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to jump into a conversation with these wonderful panelists. Just want to add that in addition to moderating this conversation, I also identify as a bisexual woman. Just to leap into a little bit more about what this panel will be about. The panel is called We're Not Free Until We're All Free. And essentially what we would like to talk about is the fact that it's now been more than a year since last March when our theaters shut down in their physical spaces due to the pandemic. And over the past year, we've had to find a lot of ways to be innovative in the way that we create our art. We've also been seeing a dramatic transformation in the way that we talk about equity when it comes to making our art. It's been a year now since the murder of George Floyd and the subsequent uprisings. And without these uprisings, we wouldn't have the gift of the We See You White American Theater letter that was created to provide guidelines for moving forward. And we wouldn't be having some of the conversations that we're having today about marginalized communities and how we can uplift these communities to better enable them to do their art and tell their stories. And so this month's programming is in honor of Juneteenth, which just passed, but in the honor of the tradition of activists in the Black liberation movement uplifting other voices from other marginalized communities. We wanted to take this time and our programming to also include other communities. And so, this month is also, in addition to a month that's significant to the Black community because of Juneteenth, it is also significant to the queer community because it's Pride Month. And so I just want to take time to acknowledge that, and also the fact that, Black trans activists are largely responsible for the queer liberation movement as well. And so moving into our conversation, I think the first thing that I would like to talk to our panelists about is just the way that your identities intersect with your art. What are the ways in which you bring your identity to your art? And I'm happy to hear from anyone who would like to share.
I'm bad at sitting with silence, so I guess I'll jump in. So the theater company that I started on a wing and a prayer and like -$5 in my bank account totally emerged because I had worked for a summer at a professional theater company in Los Angeles. And I just was like watching so many young women, people of color, queer folks, myself included, just like none of them were getting the parts they deserved. They're pretty much the only demographic getting cast were white men over 60. And I was just watching these incredibly talented people and being like, what is happening? Like, how is this person have one line? Like, I'm very, very confused. And, I was watching like the beautiful artistic light just like fade out of my peers' eyes. And it was making me feel crazy. And I was driving home from a callback for Juliet, I think. And I knew I didn't get it because I had been told that I had a very aggressive take on Juliet. And I just it popped in my head and I was like, what if we aren't ingenues? What if we're Nongenues? And I put the call out, and the queer folks who came out, the young women in the industry who came out, the folks of color who came out, it was like this powerhouse. Celia, actually, who invited me onto this panel, she was in our first production. And we had this all woman post-apocalyptic Julius Caesar in a parking lot in Echo Park. And it was just I felt like we were bringing together the spirit of this big change from so many voices that our first read through, I'm waxing on a little bit, but our first read through, the power in the room of so many people who had been told over and over again that their voices didn't matter. I felt like I got sort of punched in the gut in the best possible way. And I also felt like I was finally watching theater that wasn't boring, for the first time since I had come to Los Angeles, because the stories that we make should be actually representing the experiences that we're having. And so I, as a queer woman, make a lot of work about girlhood and queerness, and also looking at survivorship and the way in which theater and the entertainment industry kind of propagates sexual violence and sexual assault, and how we participate in that, and also how we can use theater to fight back against that. And it's been a really beautiful experience just kind of putting the call out and seeing how many people just came because they all were having the same experiences I was in terms of feeling marginalized in our own voices. Because I don't know, they make you feel like you're alone. They make you feel like you're the only one who sees these things and sees these problems. And then you get together with the group and you're all ready to take over the world. So that was a long answer, but I don't know. This is exciting.
That's fantastic. That's what we're here for. We're here to hear about your experiences. This is a time to lift up these voices, you know, our voices. Amir?
I guess I came into, in terms of finding my non-binary identity, non-binary wasn't something that really entered the vernacular till 3-4 years ago. So I knew that I needed to find queer stories that were my own, but it was hard to find an avenue for that. And actually, you know, just coming up on the Pulse anniversary, something that kind of stirred me to action was that I saw all these the After Orlando movement happening all over the country, all over the world. And it hit me that, like, we need to do an After Orlando. So I co-produced an After Orlando night, and I made sure that there were no cis straight men on that stage. And so there was we had 30 something actors who were either people of color or queer people, or sometimes both. And we raised over $1,100 for a Pulse memorial. And that kind of stirred something in me. And one of the lovely actors who I had on stage with me at that time, and we were like, this should only be the beginning of the conversation, like a theater action. So we took the model of After Orlando, created by Missing Bolts, and we created We the People theater action about 4 years ago. And we followed the entire prompt system that Missing Bolts had established, because they also had another gun control theater action that they put out. So we started putting out a theater action, you know, in response to the orange one, who shall not be named. And with each evening of We the People, we would pick a different nonprofit to raise money for. And we always made it a model that we wanted the writings to go to anyone, everywhere, all over the country. Whoever wanted to submit could submit. But we definitely made it a casting choice that unless the role specifically called for someone to be white, we wanted to change the model of that, because it's so much the everyman that people automatically go to casting white people. And we wanted to say, unless the role has to be white, let's branch out into different communities. And we even were able to have some shows in COVID, over Zoom, changing to this format before I think everyone got zoomed out. Right now we're figuring out what to do next. But in terms of my own identity, theater companies that have given me the opportunity to actually perform as a non-binary individual helped me find that part of being an artist. Because yes, I can play cis men till the cows come home. I can play crazies and nerds, whatever. But I don't think it was until Rogue Artists Ensemble really gave me the opportunity in Wood Boy Dogfish to be Fox and the showmaster that I was like, why shouldn't this be the way that why should I just have to sit on the sidelines and just kind of fit myself into these other roles that people have set out for me because I look a specific way, or I don't necessarily match the aesthetic of certain affinity groups of which I supposedly belong to. So yeah, now it's a matter of, okay, cool, yeah, I will happily play cis men, you know, get those jobs, get those gigs. A job is a job, but I'm now submitting for female roles. I'm submitting for female roles and non-binary roles. And if there's a role that's traditionally a woman's role that I want, I will contact that theater company and I'll be like, hey, you open to this? Because I would be great for this. And I'm just trying to get my foot in the door to get people to think about casting in a different way.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Tiana?
Well, I would like to, in response to the question of how I bring my identity to the theater that I make, I would actually like to start with a quote from Audre Lorde, who's not an actor or a theater maker, but is still an inspiration to me in so many ways. And this is from her paper, Poetry is Not a Luxury, which was published in, I think, 1977. And it starts, for women then, poetry is not a luxury. It is a vital necessity of our existence. It forms the quality of the light within which we predicate our hopes and dreams towards survival and change, first made into language, then into idea, then into more tangible action. Poetry is the way we help give name to the nameless so it can be thought. And this, it pretty much articulates how I feel about theater. And my theater career, or my, and especially like my early career and my early education, was very unfortunately very much centered around trying to like transcend my Blackness or transcend, you know, my own particular neurodivergency or my queerness, or even transcending my womanhood in a way that was more mainstream. And so coming to the realization that and living that life and living that actor life, really, it really, like what Olivia said, like was draining the light from my eyes. And so now I feel like my whole theater presence is predicated around decentering the whiteness and the maleness that we've been thought, and the straightness that we've been thought to think of as the foundations of theater, and centering those who have been denied a space to be themselves, or to see themselves fully realized on the stage. And I've gotten a couple of glimpses of that. Men on Boats at Son of Sumley, playing being able to play as a woman, playing as a man, and getting but not playing as a man, because that's not how that play is written. Being able to play with the spectrum of gender in a way that was really specific to me was very eye-opening, and was a definitely refreshing, a refreshing experience after, you know, a few years of maybe doing theater that made me happy, but like I was still looking for a way to really feel like I was on stage, as opposed to somebody I was expected to play who was also playing a different character. And so just trying to eliminate those levels of self-doubt that I feel like are really indoctrinated into us in early theater education. And in certain, you know, professional spaces also, definitely. Another, and you know, and even the Men on Boats experience wasn't perfect in terms of race and gender and that experience, but it was close. And I know that playing Olivia in Olivia Buntaine's or Project Nongenue's 12th Night was definitely like, it let me know that the type of theater that I endeavor to create is possible, when in other spaces I had been told that it was impossible. So yeah, that's how I bring my identity to my work.
Thank you so much. We'll hear from Sandra next.
All of what you have been saying, I completely agree with all of that. I've often said that this is defying the norm, and it has to be continued. Just because someone's been used to it or it's tradition doesn't mean that you have to follow it. That's not the way. Something different should be done. I mean, for me as a deaf individual, I have to think about, okay, yeah, I'm deaf. I use sign language. I don't speak. I don't hear. And I use the word don't, not can't. So I say, I don't hear, I don't speak, I sign. And there was one year that I wanted to give up. there were so many people who are ignorant, and so many of them were just assuming things, assuming that I can't, when, you know, I would put myself forward, but I feel like I was stuck with a role, or I'm a damsel in distress, or I'm deaf, and this hearing person, I mean, oftentimes the hearing man would come and save me, and you know, who would, you know, no offense to those people who have been doing that way, great for you, but I want to challenge it, you know, to something more, to something different. That's why I'm starting to go ahead and direct more and produce more. I will always be an actress, but I also want to create the stories where people can feel more themselves rather than having to accommodate other people's needs. And really, deaf people often have to do that, often have to match whatever the role needs. And a few years ago, I just decided I'm done. And, you know, sometimes I would look for roles that maybe weren't deaf, but I would still audition for them. And 50% of the time they'd say yes. And so it's really just about educating people and exposing them. But it's just become a common standard, you know, that one theater company is great. Okay, then you go to a new theater one, and then you got to start the whole process again. And, you know, I'm only one person. I don't represent the whole deaf community. I don't represent the whole deaf and disabled, or the whole spectrum of it. So many theater companies don't understand that. They don't understand that it's a spectrum, that my way means that everyone's the same. That's not true. How I sign, how I proceed with myself, how I work with an interpreter, especially using an interpreter, that's, the list goes on. There's so many different things that I could tell you that are different to the individual. So sometimes I think, okay, fine, well, what can I do? I can direct. Because as an actress, as a deaf actress, oftentimes it's usually within a hearing group, and they have an ASL master, meaning there is a English script that is translated into ASL, but we don't sign exactly the same way English is worded. But that's it. Most of them are hearing cast, and that's great. They can do the research, but it's not equal. You know, the hearing director, having hearing director, that's fine, but why not have a deaf co-director? That saves a lot of issues, saves a lot of going back and forth, just having someone co-direct. So that's my ideal situation, really. You know, if a hearing director wants to direct with a deaf person, that's great. Then go ahead, bring in a deaf assistant or co-director. You know, don't rely on an ASL team for everything. You know, there's just someone who can be translating it, but that's different. An ASL master, you could have a deaf team, but then there's also an interpreter, and those people are separate. So oftentimes the company thinks that it's just the same person, but it's not. And especially how it's the same thing of how I identify with my queer identity. There's just so many other deaf queer people out there, and who identify as even more things too. And, you know, they also want to work. They're waiting for that. So let them do something. And that's why, as a production manager of Deaf Austin Theater, next year, we will be producing a full production of Therapy Adjunct of the Lamy Project. And that is a full deaf ASL cast. And that's going to be coming out next year. And so I want to direct something with them, and with Deaf West as well. And it's not just me. I'm encouraging other people to be open-minded and to share. And we need more disabled representation on the production team. And the actors can't do everything. They shouldn't have to, but we do. We do. And it's time to change that by having a different production team. And just listen to us. Just listen. Just listen.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then now we'll hear from Diana.
Sandra, I love that you are going to direct more. Yes, please, because I think you're right. We need more disabled representation on the other side, not just on stage. And because the question was, how has your art identity impacted your art, and I have to say my art has actually impacted my identity. I'm someone who acquired their disability. I acquired my disability at 20 as I was studying at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts. And so I was thinking that my career was headed in one direction, and then I got slapped with a diagnosis, which made me pack up my bags and go home. I finished my degree, but I came home to Los Angeles to heal. And I found this incredible community here. And what was so sad is that I hid the fact that I was type 1 for like the next decade. I refused to tell anyone, especially people that I worked with, because I thought that I would be perceived as someone that couldn't do the job, especially when I was acting. And it was through acting, I trained to be a director, so it took time to convince folks as a woman, as a young woman, that I could take the reins. But that switch happened. And so while I was directing for East West Players, Snehal Desai, their artistic director, asked me to direct Mike Daisy's The Trump Card with a cast of 4 BIPOC artists with all sorts of sexual orientations and gender identifications. And it was just like a really rich room. And listening to them discuss the microaggressions in the script and discuss how their identities intersected with Mike Daisy's, who is a white male, walking outside after one of the rehearsals, I was like, oh, I'm invisibly disabled. And it like clicked for the first time that this was a community I was part of. And so that led me on this deep dive into really learning what that meant and embracing it and walking into the room with that, because my art got better when I took that identity out of the corner that I had shoved it in and brought it to my work. And I say to my rooms, I have one rule: everything else is fair flippin' game, and that is protect yourself and others. And I mean it spiritually, physically, and emotionally. And I realize now I made that rule happen. I heard it somewhere. It somehow came into my being, but I made it for my rehearsal rooms because I was protecting myself so that I could like eat, just as you saw me do just a moment ago, to make sure that my blood sugar is balanced. But what I've found is that because of this, it's led the people on my teams, on stage and off, to bring their full selves to the work and not worry about telling me when they have a bum knee or that they're neurodivergent or that they need the script printed in 18-point font. All these things kind of opened up, and I am just really grateful to be part of the community. And take us forward, because we do need more representation. Because I think part of why I hid is I didn't see myself. I didn't see myself represented. And now I have a play about type 1 diabetes that I performed at 11 a.m. and I'll perform again tomorrow at 6 p.m. But I'm also working with Michael Shutt, a stroke survivor. He survived 3 strokes. He's got an incredible journey to share with folks. And, you know, he's now got a solo show. And so I'm working more and more with other disabled artists, and it's fantastic and incredibly creative. So yeah, it impacted my art, impacted my identity, and then my identity definitely has impacted positively my art.
That's so fantastic. And as a fellow director, I would like to borrow your phrase, your rehearsal room phrase. It's so fantastic. Tiana, I think had one more thing to say, and then we'll move on.
Oh, I didn't. I just don't know how to turn my raised hand off. But since you called on me, I would love to just piggyback off of what you were talking about, Diana, of your art impacting your identity. Because I remember when I feel like a lot of times in theater spaces, especially being a person of color, especially being Black and a woman and queer, that those identities are like, I was engaging with white artistic directors and straight white actors who were seeing their perception of those identities. And so seeing me through a filter and then placing artistic expectations on me, that were reflective of those filters. And I was punishing myself for not being able to sort of meet those expectations. And it wasn't until, and that stress and that frustration, you know, even though I resent having to go through it, it helped me realize, it helped me come out of the closet. It helped me, you know, come out to my mother. It helped me realize that like my mental health, like, oh, you know, maybe your brain just works differently. And so realizing that, and then realizing that that's, you know, those were not things that were going to stop me from being my best artist self. Rather, it was the expectations that were placed on me that are incorrect. And so, yeah, so that's why theater is so important. I'm done.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Amir, you wanted to add on to that?
I did. Yeah, jumping on both of those things. Coming into back to the non-binary conversation, when I was doing Wood Boy with Rogue Artists, at the same time that I was performing in that, I was playing a show mother in Serial Killers, which is like a late night ongoing show, and I was in this show playing the show mother at the same time that I was playing this non-binary fox creature, and playing both of those at the same time was kind of what gave me the freedom to finally start exploring how I would present outside of the rehearsal room. And it was at that moment that I started being like, hey, I want to start dressing like this. I want to start doing this. These two roles that I'm playing right now are the most artistically fulfilled I have felt in a long time. And it's not like I have to do anything to fit into these boxes. Like, these two roles are me. Like, I don't. And Tiana, what you were saying about trying to fit into that box of what others expect you to perform as, it actually brings up the topic of conversation of, as a non-binary artist, there's still a lot of ways of how non-binary people are supposed to look. Like, a lot of people assume that non-binary people are supposed to be androgynous and female presenting and have little pixie haircuts, and that's a I have auditioned for several shows that have called for non-binary people, and even though I've given strong auditions, it's ultimately been like, well, you present as male. And it's like, well, then you don't put a call out for non-binary people if you don't know what non-binary actually means. Like, if you want someone with a pixie haircut who's female, like if you want a tomboy, like put that out there. But there's a lot of, I even had a whole argument with the affinity and the gay theater in town because they didn't understand what non-binary is. And I'm like, as the queer theater in town, you should be ahead of this. You should know what gender fluidity is. You should know what non-binary is. And I think there's a lot of people, even outside of the predominantly cis het white theater companies, where there can be room for improvement, where there can be room of, hey, only this amount of people who look this way in this theater are represented, but we have this mission statement that's supposed to cover this spectrum. Why are we only covering this letter and not everyone else in the alphabet? And, you know, I can't speak for other affinity theaters necessarily, but other people probably can. Is everyone who that mission statement is supposed to represent actually represented?
That's fantastic. In the interest also of educating those who might be listening to this panel who are not familiar with some of these identities, right? And giving people access to this conversation, I'm wondering, Amir, if you could just define non-binary for the audience or those listening, and also Tiana, if you could define neurodivergency for the listeners.
Sure. So for, I guess, to lead you into my exploration of non-binary, before the word non-binary came into fruition, because again, it's a new term, people are just kind of getting used to it, I started to question whether I was trans, because I knew that I wasn't a normal queer. So am I trans? And I was kind of leaning towards that direction, but yet I didn't feel like I wanted to go through the surgery, through the physical modifications of that. And I'm like, well, then where do I fit in that spectrum if I identify with a lot of what trans people go through of not feeling like this is the body I was supposed to be born into, but yet not wanting to actually modify it, change it. So then non-binary came about, and that's kind of, I mean, there are a lot of non-binary trans people. So just because someone's non-binary doesn't mean they're also not trans. That's all. Non-binary is not a one size fits all, but it's pretty much someone that doesn't just identify with one of the two traditionally normal genders, male, female. And different non-binary people have different ways of expressing what their own personal gender identity is. Like if you ask one non-binary person, they may identify as agender, asexual. For me, that doesn't resonate because I'm like, well, that kind of feels like it's stripping me of my sexuality and everything that I kind of like. So I kind of identify as being dual gender because I like the way that sounds. But what I've often told people, even before non-binary came into fruition, that I'm a straight woman in a gay man's body. But again, my non-binariness is not the same as other people. So make a long story long. Non-binary is pretty much someone who doesn't just identify as male, female. It's all over the spectrum.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that explanation. And then Tiana, if you could share a little bit about the definition of neurodivergent.
Yeah, I don't have like a official medical definition right in front of me, but it's basically like neurodivergent. It's basically the way that your neuro brain works is a little bit divergent from the way that the mainstream population is thought to work, even though I feel like the definition of neurodivergent is always expanding, and we're always learning more about how the brain works and about how mental health has sort of been has been greatly affected by white supremacy. And so the ways in which we talk about mental health are very stigmatized by that. And so when I say neurodivergent, I mean anybody with a mental illness, because it is an illness in the brain. I personally suffer from depression and anxiety, and what I thought was just those two things, I realized just in the past few years is depression and anxiety brought on from having undiagnosed ADHD, because the ways we're taught to think of mental illness and ADHD and autism, it's still very much like the cultural image of those things are still like white children who are hyperactive when it, or white male children who are hyperactive when it presents differently, across a wide spectrum of people. And so it's often undiagnosed in people of color, especially like women and girls. And so that's what I mean by neurodivergent.
Thank you so much. And I can relate to a lot of what you're saying. I'm actually 2 months into an ADHD diagnosis myself. So so I can relate to a lot of what you're saying about the symptoms that are associated with it presenting differently in women than what we've been taught to expect.
Yeah. And sorry.
Thank you so much. So Sandra?
Well, yeah, earlier I believe you were talking about the spectrum. So I just wanted to emphasize that it seems like a theme that we all have in common is that there's a spectrum, especially within theater companies out there. Even, people who are watching, whenever you meet someone who identifies as a certain group, it doesn't mean that they represent all of the people within that group. Some people, really just, you got to keep in mind that they don't still, it doesn't matter what their identity is. And you think, okay, I meet them, that this is what they identify as. Oh, they're the same, or I wish they were the same. And that's not what it is. I mean, that's the beauty of the world, is that there's a diversity, there's a spectrum. One person has this approach, another person has this approach. This person proceeds in this way, this person does in this way. There's a whole variety. So we can't think that everyone's just the same, that there's just one personality. I mean, that's not how the world works. And so, I mean, I often try and emphasize that I don't represent the specific community. I'm one of the members of the community, and some people may identify the same way that I do. But I mean, let's say for the deaf community, for example, I was born deaf. There are people who have deaf family, people who became deaf later in life, people who are more oral, people who use sign language. Whatever it may be, there's a whole range. And again, that's why I try and emphasize that. I love it because people think, oh, you know, this person's so cool, this person's so cool. You know, it's not just me. There's a bunch of cool people out there that I wish everyone could see, because again, I mean, that relates to how you feel about this. Now, talking about the spectrum, okay, yeah, I could be one person on the spectrum, and I hate this word, but I guess it you know, being common or normal, or not normal, but I don't know what the exact word is, but along those lines. Oftentimes people will say, well, this person is part of a group, whatever that is, they'll still feel alone, you know, and that always bothers me. For me, for example, not often, but sometimes I'm the only deaf person in that theater or in that storyline. And, you know, why is that? The same with queer, I could be the only one there. And you know, if the story is about isolation, then sure, but if it's not, then why are we often isolating ourselves? You know, why is our community represented as that when we don't always feel that? So it's not shown in the story. You know, what is it, hard? No, it's cool. It's cool to have more people, to see what conflicts they have, because oftentimes they'll think that, for example, I'm going to use my experience, that placing me as a deaf actress and then placing a hearing actress, wow, there's such a conflict, like there's a miscommunication. But deaf, you know, we think that if you have two deaf actors that there's not going to be any conflict. No, you have no idea. Again, it's the same thing as having an all hearing team, but they don't know. You don't know who has a conflict. Same with queer roles, same with any kind of role. If there's a team and then there's no representation on that team, then it's not going to be equal. It's not going to be fair. And it's going to be all onto that one actor to try and make it equal. So no matter what, it should be on the team. And so that's just my little words of wisdom to the audience.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then we'll hear from Olivia on this subject, and then I'm going to have to move on to our next question.
Yeah, I mean, I just really, let me raise my hand, I'll forget. I just really want to, like, a common theme I also heard among what literally everyone was saying is this idea of particularly theater being a moment where we have this like one moment where we realized we were allowed to be who we are for some reason. Like it just happened and we were like, oh, like and a lot of times it's total luck. Like total luck that at 15, I was cast as Hamlet. And then I was suddenly like, oh, I can be mean. I can be like a little masculine, but I can still also be feminine, but also I can be mean and like, just like totally angsty and obsessed with the ethics of the world. And that moment was so huge for me in terms of understanding, like, I think what Sandra May said at the beginning, like, just because things have been done a certain way, that's truly not a good reason to keep doing them. If you enjoy them that way, sure, go ahead. But it is literally, we've always done it that way. It's like, cool, I'm so bored. Let's do it a different way. Let's do it a way where I can actually play the game, because I can't play it when you guys play it this way. And so it is this moment of identity. And I think when you live in these different intersections of marginalization, you just are constant, the boat keeps coming for all these people And you never get on it in all these stories that we see in all this media. And you're like, well, that person is on the boat, but how come if I get on the boat, I have to like, I don't know, like dye my hair or like just like cover half my face or like pretend I don't have, I don't know, like an extra long pinky toe. Like you always have to fracture some part of who you are in order to get on that boat, to be in that story. And those are the moments why I think a lot of us love theaters, when we're like, oh my God, I'm totally unfractured. I'm just totally here. I'm totally myself, because that fracturing of identity is like, let's call it what it is, completely violent. It's violent emotionally, and then it sinks into like, I mean, it's violent spiritually, and then it becomes violent physically and socially and politically in terms of like the way in which we are carving out people's experiences from stories, the way in which we are carving in oppression, the way in which people are treated in rehearsal rooms. Like we see White American theater really got at it in terms of the ways in which racism in theater has been codified and institutionalized, and like queerness often just not recognized. Women, like there are literal regulations, like, oh, I'm gonna stop talking soon, but like when I start thinking about non-union policies in just Los Angeles theater, just start there. We have the youngest, most like at-risk actors going into non-union houses where they are just abused to no end, and there's no one for them to go to, and they're encouraged to keep that to themselves. So like this moment that it seems like everyone in this room, everyone's had this moment in theater where they're like, oh my God, I'm unfractured. And then to also realize the system we're in is a violent one. And so how do we sit at that intersection and really try to change it? Because everyone should be allowed to have that unfractured moment. And we're all talking about the fact that they're not, which is, I'm getting all hot and bothered. I'm gonna stop talking.
No, that was fantastic. That was actually a great segue into what I wanted to talk about next, actually. Because speaking of themes that are coming up from what everyone is talking about, right? There's also a theme or a repeated sentiment of coming into your identity and owning it and being able to make art based around it is empowering, right? It's freeing. It's created community where some of us had none beforehand. And so it's very important to acknowledge the importance of that space. I think it's also important to acknowledge areas for improvement that are needed in our industry to continue making that space more inclusive. So the next question that I kind of have for everybody is what are the areas that you've seen for improvement? What are the challenges that you're still facing in rooms because of your identities? And what are proposed solutions that you have that you can think of that could be possible steps forward?
I can speak to this. So much of what you just shared, Olivia, like resonates because ableism is so baked into the American theater as well. So as I was reading the We See White American, all of their amazing documents, thank you to those folks for putting in all that time to list it out, because, you know, when they're talking about 10 out of 12, it's like 10 out of 12s are really hard on a body. And so like it's, you know, I read every single one of them and was like, yeah, sounds good. Sounds great. Sounds great. As a disabled artist myself, I was just like, I completely agree with what is being shared right now. And so I think we have to recognize that we're individuals coming together. And so when you, it's Claudia Alec who I think started asking folks like, what are your access needs? As like, what are your pronouns? What are your access needs? And also I go so far as to say, like, you can share it here, or you can tell me or the stage manager later, so that we can like provide the best space possible so that you can do your best work and we can get everything else out of the way. And so I model that by sharing immediately what my access needs are, so that folks know that that's welcome, and they can turn to me for that. And I am privileged because I often am the director in the room and I can set that tone. But I definitely encourage everyone to state their access needs and to have that conversation with the people higher up, that this just becomes a regular thing, because 1 in 5 people is disabled in this country. And that's a lot of folks. And a lot of us aren't necessarily able to, don't feel welcome. That's a big thing, I think, in the disabled community, is like, yeah, access is one thing, but have you made us actually feel welcome in your room? So that's another thing that I'll just throw out there as something to kind of work on, is like, how can we welcome each other into our spaces, into our rooms, into our process, into the stories that we are sharing. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Sandra?
Well, one big obvious thing is for accessibility is having an interpreter. Not just that, but with theater company, especially if they're new, if you have a newer deaf person to, I mean, yeah, great, thank you. But when talking about interpreters, they always say, oh, we don't have that in our budget, or how about we get an intern interpreter? And I'm like, I've already lost jobs before because of an interpreter, because of, it's not necessarily their fault, but it's because the company refuses to pay an interpreter, a professional. And so they bring in an intern who is still learning, who is still, going on in the world. I mean, maybe they know sign and how to interpret, but they don't always know theater terms or lighting, or, I'm a director too. And, there are short statements, or they just point around, and they're not saying who specifically is the person who's talking, or just pointing, oh, this one's talking, or this one's talking. It's, I'm lucky that I'm able to look at everyone and know what's going on. But again, I'm not everyone. And there's still a struggle for me sometimes where I have to keep looking around, and I can lip read well. So, I can think, okay, well, that's not what they said. Or as I'm signing, I can look at the interpreter and read their lips and say, that's not what they said. Or maybe they didn't necessarily say the right term. And again, I'm not blaming the interpreters. It's just sometimes they don't pick certified, qualified, experienced interpreters who have that theater knowledge. And I've always, said this is, directors hire people based on their resume. So ask the interpreter for their resume, see if they've already had experience within theater interpreting, or ask me. Just ask me. I can give you a list of interpreters. And as far as budget, how we can solve that is not only having an interpreter, and if I'm the only deaf person there in that environment that's all hearing and everyone's just speaking around, then sometimes, maybe some people will learn a bit of sign. They think it's fun to learn that, and that's great. But one of my suggestions would be that don't use the budget as an excuse, saying we can't bring an interpreter because of the budget. Figure it out. If you really care, figure it out. Give us an opportunity. Don't let something like that stop you. And then second suggestion would be that the theater company, they have the staff who's there always take an ASL class. For example, one theater company, which I need to name, is Lyric Theater of Oklahoma City. And they do an amazing job. I love them because they bring certified interpreters who are great. And every Friday mornings from 8 to 9 o'clock, they'll bring in a deaf ASL teacher, and they will teach the staff sign, some basics like theater terms, whatever it may be, but they practice. And so that when I get there, they try. And that's the point, is to try so that I feel welcome, and that's only one theater company I know that does that. All of them just go on as they please. And so, okay, I know it's a theater business, that's what it is, but theater is also a family. It's a family, and deaf theater companies are great, of course. But I don't only be limited to that. We shouldn't be limited to that. So interpreters and the budget and accessibility, that is something. Just try and sign. Yep.
Thank you so much. Tiana?
I would like to start with another quote from Audre Lorde, because I cannot be stopped. And it's from her paper, The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House, which was published in 1979 and is still relevant today. The quote is, "Women of today are still being called upon to stretch across the gap of male ignorance and to educate men as to our existence and our needs. This is an old and primary tool of all oppressors to keep the oppressed occupied with the master's concerns." And I think that quote, it can be sort of expanded to also to include not just men, but also white people, but also able-bodied people and neurotypical people, of constantly having to be educated. And I think Sandra, you touched upon it, of making such great headway at one theater and then having to go to another one and start all over, and it's exhausting, and it's work that we shouldn't have to do. And so even in the past year, even though there are so many theaters that make statements that are in support of Black Lives Matter, that are in support of change and ending racism, the people making those statements sometimes don't have the education to recognize when they are using the master's tools, even if they are even if they are endeavoring to build something new. And so, or even if they're endeavoring to dismantle the master's house, they're still using the master's tools. And then when that's brought to their attention, the focus is on how that makes them feel, as opposed to what they need to do in order to be able to move forward in a truly equitable way. And so, yeah, because a lot of what I think is still very much a problem, especially talking about racism and talking about like just marginalized folks in general, is still the oversight of the oppressor. And there's still very much so people in power who won't decenter themselves or their voices, and so won't decenter the lens in which they see the rest of us, and don't understand that lens is short-sighted. They're walking around here not understanding that their education is not as well-rounded as they think. And so I think just people have to educate themselves. White people have to educate themselves on racism. Men have to educate themselves on misogyny. And, we have to stop being afraid of the words white supremacy. You walk into a room full of white people and say, hey, this is white supremacy. And suddenly everybody's like, oh my God, no, I'm not a white supremacist. I'm not a racist. And it's like, it's not about, it's like, that may be your perception. Or, I've had older white men try to argue with me about, what it is that Martin Luther King would have wanted. And it's like, you're operating with such a, it's just very sad to see these people that are operating with such a short-sighted education in theater. It's limiting the work that the rest of us get to do. It's limiting the work that they get to do. And it's limiting our craft all around. And so, yeah, that's education.
I love that. Before we move on to our next panelist, I'd actually like to ask a follow-up question about that. I also love that Audre Lorde quote about the master's tools will not dismantle the master's house. And I'm just wondering if we can name some of those tools that are still being used, in these conversations as a group, not just you, Tiana, but just, to have the conversation about specifically what are the things that aren't working, that that we can be doing. And so, Tiana, I don't know if you want to weigh in on that, or if our next panelists want to keep that in mind while we're talking about it, but let's name specific practices, you know what I mean? Let's name the things that we would like to see, change. Did you have anything to that, Tiana, before I move on?
I'd love to hear from other people about that, actually.
Sure, absolutely. We'll go to Amir next.
So one of the things that theater companies could do to make things better is to stop making excuses. Like a lot of what I hear from predominantly white theater companies, when you're like, hey, this isn't equitable. There's a reason that people of color don't stay here. There's a reason queer people don't stay here, is the is that, well, we're doing better. We're doing better, aren't we? And it's like, clearly not. Clearly you are not doing better. And when did the argument first come up? And why has it taken this long for you to say, hey, we're doing better, without actually taking the actionable steps? You know, there's a lot of excuses out there. A lot of what I hear from white people is, well, if we allow more people of color and plays that are more diverse into our company, well, then when am I gonna get cast and stuff? Or another one that I've heard is, oh, hey, you know, just because they're white, it doesn't mean they, you know, they're not the most talented in the room and not the one who's done the most work to get to where they are. Why should we take that position away from them? And so those are just some of the many excuses. And I think that one of the things that can be done is, you know, take a look at who's in the room, who's making decisions. Why are other groups of people not staying? I think those are questions. You have to sit in the discomfort, and giving yourself pats on the back for going at a snail pace is not good enough when other people are immediately being like, oh, we have a problem. This is what we're going to immediately do to solve it. This is a huge problem. I think theater companies, all theater companies, even the ones in affinity groups, need to have accountability. You know, just because you're lifting up the marginalized of one particular group of people does not mean that you're still not doing something to hurt other people in that marginalized group. There has to be a constant, how are we doing? Are we doing everything we can do right now? No? Okay, who are we hurting right now? I think there has to be those constant questions that theater companies ask themselves. You know, something that We the People did, you know, I mentioned our casting process of like, if the role didn't specifically call for a white cis person, then we would automatically be like, okay, let's try to play with gender. Let's make sure that we can get as many different looking people in this room so that we can actually represent everybody. And I think, you know, someone once submitted a play being like, hey, I would either like Native actors or Mexican actors in this. And I'm like, well, I know plenty of Mexican actors, but I don't know a lot of Native actors. So I'm gonna go find them. And I think it's a matter of being like, hey, who are the communities who I have not spoken to? Who are the communities that we are still not representing? You know, like We the People, great. We're doing everything we can, but we clearly haven't reached everybody. So cool, Native voices. Let's start bringing that in and being like, oh, we haven't really approached the disabled and neurodivergent communities yet. And that was something we started to kind of like really research before the shutdown and be like, all right, how do we have, you know, but there was only like 2 people running this thing. And I'm like, well, how do we do this? Who do we reach out to? Like, not doing the research and not looking for someone is no longer an excuse. And some of the things that I've seen in this past year of like Zoom virtual readings, it's like you're still seeing all white faces. And it's like, you're on Zoom. You could literally have someone from across the country. Like, okay, you don't know any Black actors in Los Angeles? I mean, how? But like, fine. Pick a Black actor in New York. Pick one from Iowa. Like, you just see a lot of these companies making excuses and not actually doing the work. And one more thing, and then I swear I'll stop going off on this rant, is, you know, in this past year, there's been a large exodus from different institutions. or large mass performative activism. You know, like you see the different theater companies that put up the Black Lives Matters statements, or as I like to call it, Black Square activism. Like, is that all they're doing? Like, is all the, like, what else is going on? Or you have everyone who left LASA after everything that went wrong with LASA. Who were the companies that left LASA because immediately they were like, yeah, no, we've known from the beginning LASA, you know, there have been these problems. And then who are the ones who are like, oh, everyone else left, if we don't, they're gonna know, they're gonna jump onto us. So people need to keep asking themselves the hard questions and to sit in the discomfort, because it's never gonna be comfortable unless we ask ourselves the honest questions.
Thank you so much. This is such a useful panel. Like, my biggest regret is that we only have 15 minutes left, because I have 1,000 more questions for all of you. So as this concludes, I will be lobbying Skylight for part 2 of this panel, so everyone stay tuned. But in the meantime, if you are listening to this conversation, we are going to do a brief Q&A at the end. If you have any questions for these panelists, please feel free to be putting them in the chat on your end. And in the meantime, we'll just continue to talk about this topic, and we'll hear from Olivia on this.
Yeah, I'll try and keep it brief, because I actually have like I was like, Olivia, you're gonna just talk forever. So I came up with 3 concrete suggestions. And I would say nobody asked me, but I was asked. So I'm gonna just do my best here. Number 1, for theater makers, write and or ask for contracts. Literally, like, it makes such a big difference, right? Because first of all, if you walk into a room and the first thing you read is, we do not tolerate discrimination, we do not tolerate harassment, this is what these things look like, if you can't deal with that, get out of the room. It also says, this is what we can commit to pay you, this is what we say, like, your hours are going to be. And if any of this goes wrong, this is your reporting process. This is who you can go to. And then if something still goes wrong, you have a freaking piece of paper that you can point to in a court of goddamn law if you choose to go there and say, this is what was promised to me and this is what I did not get. And like, that is, I mean, let's not get started about the court of law, but I'm just saying that is a way to actually have accountability and transparency. And so if, as a theater maker, if you run a company, whatever, if you're actually committed to being held accountable for your actions, prove it by giving your actors contracts, regardless of whether you're a union company. And if you're not getting a contract, be like, hello, it is common decency for you to tell me how much I can expect to be paid and who I can report to, and how my safety is going to be taken care of. So contracts. My second point is, as we are often told when we are training as an actor, to not worry about making yourself look good, worry about making your scene partner look good. I remind myself every single day that there will always be a lived experience that I do not have. There will always be an oppression that I am not carrying every single day. And it is my responsibility to be number one watching out for those. Number one watching out for the stories that I do not carry within me, because how can I expect others to be my ally and have my back if I'm not having other people's back? And also, like, in demonstrating that, we teach our communities what that looks like. And so, like, yeah, for sure, always have your own back, always be calling out the shit, but like, that needs to go hand in hand with constantly analyzing, what am I bringing in that someone else isn't, and how can I use that? Just like everyday question, every doorway question. And then my last thing, because we didn't get a chance to talk about this that much, but hire intimacy directors, just like, for the love of God, hire intimacy directors with training. Make sure you check that they've been trained and it's not just like a fun, sexy time, because that's not actually what intimacy direction is. It's about like really taking care of people. Sorry, I didn't mean to be salty at all. It's just like, there is a lot of sexual harassment, sexual violence in the theater industry and the entertainment industry at large, and it breaks my heart beyond belief how behind we are in that conversation. Like we think like, oh, you know, a couple celebrities got busted, we're good. We're not. Like, we're so not good. And having an intimacy director in the room is going to make your plays better, and it's going to make your TV better if it's a coordinator, and it's going to increase your accountability and the safety of all involved. That's all I got to say.
Actually, I just want to piggyback on that real quick. For those who are uninitiated, could you just explain what an intimacy director is?
Yes, I meant to do that. I just got so hot. An intimacy direction as a whole is basically, think about fight direction, think about fight choreography. If there's a physical fight in a show, right, you're gonna, God willing, you're gonna have someone come in and choreograph that fight. And then that fight should be done the same way. And if there's ever a problem with that fight, you're gonna go back and readdress the choreography. And a choreographer is gonna work with you to make sure you're doing things that are comfortable within your own body's needs. An intimacy director does essentially the same thing with any scenes of heightened physical intimate contact or simulated sex. And basically an intimacy director goes in there, figures out what people's boundaries are, make sure it's nice and safe, make sure it's creative and interesting and fits in the story, and no one gets assaulted or harassed, hopefully, and it's so much better.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think it's just important to have in this conversation, the conversation about emotional safety, as well as, because that's what we're talking about here in terms of inclusivity. It's making space emotionally safe for us all to come in and make art in it. And also, I just wanted to say that your second point was a perfect tagline to the name of this program, which is we're not free until we're all free, right? So our mission should be to look around and, you know, make sure that those around us are free, because we won't truly be free ourselves until we've done that. So I will now throw to Sandra.
Okay, those 3 points, to Olivia's points, I agree with that. Contract, everything. I mean, for me, I'll put down the interpreter of my choice. I'll put that in a contract. I will put down captionist. If there's any advertisements, any festivals, any whatever it is, to have a captionist there, or I won't promote it. I won't. You know, I've always done that. I put that down. It's sad, but you have to put it down in there so that they'll listen to it because it's in the contract, to really emphasize that point. So it works. Do it. And then your second point, I would agree, emphasis. What we do, how there are different intersectionalities involved in theater. The production team are all typically white, cis, straight, and something's wrong with that picture. I mean, I don't mean to discriminate or cancel them, but there has to be some kind of a balance. You know, as an actor, I can imagine as a deaf actress, a deaf queer actress, let's just imagine that everyone is white and straight and male and hearing, and they mean well, maybe, but what is that? So it's more, I mean, it's cool. It's better if you have a different variety on your team too. And there are many different roles. There's wardrobe, hair, director, stage manager, assistant stage manager. Why not make all those intersectionalities too? Why not? So we can hold each other accountable too. It's not just, oh, I have to do it. It shouldn't be like that. It should be in the perspective of, this is cool. I get to learn something new. It's not something that I get to do every day. And I shouldn't, you know, oh, I'm going to make a mistake and I'm wrong. But that's fine. You shouldn't freak out, oh, I'm wrong. Oh, I did this. No, it's okay. It's a process. And, you know, if you put your heart out there, you'll be fine. That's the key. That's the key. And then the third thing you were saying, so your third point, oh, sweet third point, that's gone. The point, oh, got it. Now I remember. I'm getting passionate now. What I've noticed, something that I've noticed that's become a problem in my experience of what I've seen is that doing a show when mental health is an issue and the theater has intersectionality involved too. Again, I don't speak for everyone, but sometimes when we use our experiences in theater in the show, when we give out a story, that can affect mental health too. We're talking about mental and emotional health and experiences and how we feel after the show. Sometimes, you know, we feel a certain way after that. So especially if you're not trained, or I mean, if you are trained, but how do you separate yourself from that? So to have a theater therapist there for after the show, check in and make sure that everyone's good. That's it. I've experienced 2 productions, won't give a name for them, but 2 productions where some of that, the storyline just, you know, I felt like I needed support after that. So I would encourage, if you're doing a show with a mental health related topic, have a theater therapist ready there. You have to. You have to. That's it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. These are all such great tools. So thank you all so much for bringing your expertise to this subject. I think there might be a panelist or two who hasn't gotten to comment on this yet. If you've already spoken on this topic, I don't think that we have time, but if anyone who hasn't spoken yet has anything to say, no, good. Okay. So we are coming to the end of our program for the evening. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, but before we do go, I would love to give our panelists the opportunity to let you know any projects that they're working on that you can check out coming up, where you can find them online to see more of their work and support them in their endeavors, and also their activism, and learn from them as they continue this journey. So we'll just kind of go around and let everyone kind of speak to what they have coming up or where they can be found online, so that we can be a continued part of your journey. And we'll start with Olivia.
Yay. Man, I'm so excited to just be Googling the heck out of all these speakers. But yeah, you can find me at just my name, Olivia Buntaine. .com. I mean, what's more interesting is check out my theater company, Project Nongenue, which is PROJECTNONGENUE.org. Yeah, so we're in LA. We're always causing mischief. Mischief is the key. We've got a zine coming out at the end of the summer, and perhaps a surprise performance or something at the end of the summer. So keep an ear out. Yeah, I think that's pretty much what I have to offer. And also, seriously, like, there's a message box on my website. I will respond to you. Email me. Let's talk. Let's revolt. I'm here. Let's go. I'm ready.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Amir.
I have a website. It's theamirlevy.com. So the THE, Amir, AMIR, Levy, LEVI. A lot of people spell Levy with a Y. That is not me. So I can go into whole Liza with a Z song number right now, but no, it's theamirlevy with an I.com. I also have an Instagram, the Amir Levy. My business page on Facebook is the Amir Levy. So find me. Instagram is usually the best, my most up-to-date thing, because it's the easiest to manage. Yeah, check me out on Instagram. And what's currently running on the Blank Theater YouTube page is my one-person musical, Nathan C. Jones, A Love Story. That's a question mark. And we premiered it in the pandemic over a year ago. So for a year ago. So yes, check out Nathan C. Jones, A Love Story on the Blank Theater YouTube site, and find me on Instagram. And yeah, I'm always down to throw a revolt.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Tiana.
I don't have a website, but find me on Instagram at T_QUANT. Get in my DMs. I'm down to clown. I also run the Wallace Studio Ensemble Instagram page, which is Wallace Studio Ensemble with underscores between each word. And we are currently producing a short story podcast series with stories sourced from local and international playwrights. You can find that at Ensemble Arts Exchange on Spotify or wherever you get podcasts. You can also find me on YouTube with the 354 squad, I make reaction and gaming content with a bunch of other cool theater people. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. Diana.
Okay, well, at any time, you can find my radio play version of A Lesson in Swimming on my website, but also at alessoниnswimming.com. And that's the play by the 3-time stroke survivor, Michael Shutt. And so that is now an audio drama that you can listen to anytime, anywhere. And I definitely recommend it. Additionally, this weekend on All Arts, produced by Beth Morrison, Projects and Sawdust, is coming out a kind of opera music video, a short 10-minute excerpt from Polymnia by Theodosia Rousseau. It's an opera I'm working on that's about the Greek genocide. That is Theodosia's family story. So that piece is remarkable. So All Arts is where you can watch that this weekend. And before then, tomorrow night at 6 o'clock, I am once again performing Blood Sugar, my show about having type 1 diabetes. And also I'm going to challenge and dispel the lies about diabetes in all of its forms. So it's whether you have diabetes or you know someone or you don't know what diabetes is, this show is for you. That is on my website, dianawyenn.com, and you can find me at Diana Wyenn also on Instagram. Yeah, I look forward to sharing my work with you.
I would also just love to shout out Diana's play as a true testament to what can be done technologically to do live theater work during this time. So very innovative, very creative way of putting audience members in your shoes. And so in terms of not just inclusivity, but in terms of pandemic artistic adaptability, definitely worth a watch. And so I would like to throw to Sandra now.
I'm excited to say 3 things. First one being that this is the first time as a producer for a documentary called Hidden Gem. And that last spring, we were safely filming during COVID. And that documentary is about a Black, deaf, gay man with HIV. As an artist, as a dancer, as an actor, all on the spectrum. And the person producing that was Mervyn Primix and O'Brien. And this is their sign name, which kind of looks like your hand turning to your chest. It's a beautiful story, and they're also a good friend of mine, very talented. And they asked me to be involved as a producer. I was like, yes, yes, of course. So we filmed that this past spring, and now we're doing fundraising and still proceeding. So hopefully it'll be released in fall or spring. So we'll see how that goes. But I was very happy to do that and to make something, and I'm ready to see what's next. I'm excited about that project. And I'm excited to be working with O'Brien and, seeing what we can do, especially as a Black, deaf, gay person. I mean, it's amazing. So I'm really excited for that to come out and to expose to people who are still, don't know about that. So we're looking out for that. And again, that's called Hidden Gem. And you can probably find that on www.hiddengemfilm.com. We're looking for fundraising, so if you can donate, if you can support, or just share. And then second thing being that I was involved 2 years ago, but it's still available. It's called Tello Films, and it's a deaf, queer, lesbian woman company, and it's called Seasons of Love. It's a film, and it's still online. It's still available for rent or for purchase, and it's awesome. It's an awesome story about Christmas and holidays, but different queer women having just their stories and their life during that time, and being involved as a queer person, with being a gay best friend who signs. It's just funny. So we want to go ahead and check that out. And then lastly, yes, there were so many things exciting, and I just wanted to share with you. So keep an eye out for that. And then for Deaf Austin Theater, follow them. We do have a big production coming up next year, which is Thelma Rise Priest, and also Deaf West, which I don't know what's coming up yet, but you can still look out and support deaf artists. Woo.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And before I hand the reins back. Sorry.
I was just involved with the NBC's show Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist. Long word, but ZEP. And we did an episode. Season 1 was great. Season 2, but NBC canceled the 3rd season. But the producers are now looking for a new home. So hopefully, hashtag save Zoe's playlist. So please support that, spread the word. It's beautiful. It's a musical comedy, and they also show real world issues with racism. There's music involved, mental health involved, and there's going to be, postpartum depression also. There's Broadway musical actors involved, hoping that they find a new home for season 3. So there, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Before I hand the reins back to our host, I just wanted to thank Skylight for programming this event and all the other programming that they're doing this month. So important to be having these conversations. I wasn't kidding. I want this entire panel assembled again because I have 12 more questions for you that I didn't get to. And also a specific thanks to Tyree Marshall and Celia Rivera for programming this event and producing this. Tyree's going to tell you about everything else that's coming up, but the inclusivity of these two communities, the LGBTQIA community and the disabled community in this conversation is so important. So thank you for making space.
Oh, thank you. I've just been so blown away by this entire conversation, and I feel honored to be in this space with all of you, to hear all of your stories. You have moved me all with all your individual stories. So I wanted to say thank you, Diana Wyenn, Olivia Buntaine, Amir Levi, Tiana Randall-Quant, Sandra May Frank, our interpreter, Sarah Cohen, and our lovely moderator, Shaina Rosenthal. I would also like to thank Judith Bourne for PR, Michael Tioli for the opening music, Garrett Crouch, our tech god for the evening, and all of the staff and board of Skylight Theater. So up next at Skylight is our final event for our Freedom Series, and it's called Elation. It's this Saturday, June 26th at 3 p.m. on YouTube. Elation is an exploration of discovering what is Black joy. And that's through curated performances, meditation, and setting intentions for the future. And if you tune in, for all those longtime Skylight Theater lovers out there, it may take place somewhere very familiar, but I don't know, I guess you have to just tune in to find out. So please join us by visiting our website at skylighttheater.org and reserve your spot for this free event. And as always, thank you all so much for your constant support for Skylight Theater. Have a lovely rest of your evening. Goodbye.